Hi and welcome back. Today we're talking about a 21-year-old forward called Kallan Murphy, born 12th of June 2003 in Wexford. He started playing with local side Enniscorthy Town, whom he stayed with throughout his youth career in Ireland until the 1st of January 2021 when, as an 18-year-old, he moved to the academy of then English 5th tier side Chesterfield FC. There he stayed for a year and a half, and although it didn't appear for the first team, it would appear he would have learnt a lot in that time, in that year and a half there. And during his time with Chesterfield, he also won the under-19s Player of the Season, so he was highly thought of. Anyways, he moved on the 1st of July 2022 to 7th tier English side Matlock. While no doubt he himself at the time probably would have been devastated or disappointed to leave Chesterfield, the fact is he wasn't playing first team football, so whatever the specifics for leaving Chesterfield were, moving into first team football in the immediate future was probably the best thing, albeit it was two tiers down from where he was, and perhaps not by choice, but again, he wasn't in the first team in the 5th tier, so it's getting him to his end goal quicker. A high point at Matlock as well was where he scored the goal of the season. Frequently moving around in non-league football in England is normal enough, and there are many factors to play as to why this happens. We're not going to get into it now, but non-league in many ways is also, in my opinion, a harder place to make it, to play, and will actually stand to you in the long run again, and is a fast, sharp learning curve that hardens you up quicker and shows all the aspects you're going to encounter in ways perhaps you may not learn early doors at a top academy or team up the tiers in England. There's plenty of players who have been there as well and that have moved to the very top, so it's not like you're going to get lost down there. Of course you can get lost anywhere, you can get lost at a Premiership side, but there's plenty of people that have come out of non-league football and gone to the very top. Most topical at the moment being Jamie Vardy, who went from the 8th tier to winning the Premiership, of course, and it wasn't a quick move through those leagues either. At 24, he was still in the 5th tier, I believe, and like many others, initially released from his parent club when he was 16. In his case, Sheffield Wednesday, who at the time were in the 3rd tier, with Vardy himself in their academy, of course, not in their first team. Not saying you have to take the long road, and there are many ways to make it to the very highest level. I'm just saying it's not a bad route or a lost cause. And in Kallan's case, he's very much still on course with his whole career just starting and all ahead of him now and back then. His scenario is different to that of older players. He's not late 20s or in his 30s in non-league football. He's only 21. Again, nothing wrong with non-league football at all. But at 21, he's put the hard graft in to date, learnt on the job, so to speak, done it the hard way, and again, it's all going to stand to him in the long run. On the 20th of December 22, he moved to Guiseley AFC in the 7th tier, where he played for the second half of the 22-23 season and the entire 23-24 season, where he won Young Player of the Year or Young Player of the Season with them, scoring 10 goals in total for the club in the 23-24 season in all competitions, I believe, with even more assists to boot. On the 1st of July 2024, he moved to Marine FC and as a result moved up a tier to the 6th tier after leaving Guiseley. He had a brief month loan with Prescott Cables from the 12th of November to the 10th of December 24. Again, not unusual short-term loans and not unusual to move around a bit in non-league football. And then finished the 24-25 season out with Marine. In total, he turned out 34 times for Marine, so again, a good game total. His contract ends on the 30th of June, i.e. next month, 2025, with Marine as per transfer market. Again, that's not unusual to have a short-term deal. And if correct, leaves him free and easy to see what's out there and make a move elsewhere with no restrictions tying him down, like no long-term contract tying him to the club. Again, and that means he can move on his terms as opposed to having to stay if he doesn't want to. Of course, he might want to stay, or not moving on his own terms. So whatever way he and his team want to play it, they're in a good spot at this stage, as said, in his career, with no roadblocks and not being tied down to a contract restricting him to a club, league, or even location, country, region, and freeing him up to assess all his options and move elsewhere if he so chooses that to be best for his career. What's next for him? Well, of course, he could stay with Marine, you'd imagine, or move to another English side in the same league or possibly higher up. And he'll be thinking onwards and upwards up the leagues if appealing options arise. Of course, you're 21, it's your career. You're not going to hang around if better options come across the table. And he'll want to progress himself up the levels anyway. He could also move back to Ireland and perhaps sign and play for a League of Ireland team, whether that's in the Premier Division or First Division perhaps. And if he chose that route, he'd be hitting the ground running. But with the League of Ireland being a summer league, a calendar year league, that would mean he wouldn't have time off after a long season in England, and he'd be kept going until October, which perhaps he may wish to do as a one-off at this stage in his career to further his career and better himself in the game. And no doubt he would get away with it at this early stage in his career, as he's very young still. And if he was ever going to do that, now would be the time to do it. But again, it's not ideal after a long, tough season. Another option would be the Northern Ireland or Scottish leagues, which run in tandem, of course, with the English system and most of Europe. So have a holiday, then go back again with a club there. Of course, our pod isn't about the UK and Irish roots, so we're going to look at other options further afield. In the past, there has been interest in Kallan in Norway, and Scandinavia as a whole is an option and a route a lot of Irish players in similar situations to Kallan have taken and are thriving in now. For example, just a couple of names to throw out there: Ben Rossiter, who's playing in Norway with Jovik Linn in the 4th tier, Abimbola Obasotu of Ängelholms in the Swedish 3rd tier, both of whom were lower down the tier systems in their respective leagues last season, cutting their teeth, so to speak, and since have stepped up the levels, stepped up a tier, which they no doubt will continue to do and excel in somewhere they're now familiar with. It would have been alien to them when they went over there, of course, but now they're grounded and set up there. There are only 2 names, of course, but there are plenty of other Irish names in Scandinavia at present and in the not too distant past. So it's a route perhaps he may decide to revisit. Again, there was interest from Norway in him. Again, a lot of those leagues, however, do run calendar year, summer seasons. So again, perhaps he may feel at present it's not a valid option, as he wouldn't have much of a break, which as an athlete, it's a factor. It's something you got to factor in. And after a long season, your body probably needs that break, and then he's back into pre-season and not go from week in, week out football to week in, week out football without a break straight away, of course. The exception to that is the Denmark League, whose season runs, again, similar to most of Europe and England, as in roughly August to May time, which will be a time frame that would suit Kallan. Of course, that's what he's been playing since he's gone to England, and as an amateur in Ireland, as a young player in Ireland. So that's the season time frame he's used to date. But that's not to say he's not going to try something different. There are other leagues elsewhere too, of course, and around the globe. And you have to look at all your options, but perhaps at this stage Kallan may not wish to go further afield in Europe, which is understandable. There are Irish players playing in lower leagues in France in the past, Spain, Italy, you name it really, Germany. Perhaps not. These have been stepping stones to further and perhaps fast track your career, with the key being on playing week in, week out, 90-minute football, of course. And examples of current Irish players who have done this, to name again just but a few: Owen Degelman went from the German 4th tier to the Northern Ireland 2nd tier, where he is at present. David Dunn and Jack O'Reilly went from the Swedish 4th tier to the Irish 2nd tier and the Northern Ireland top tier, all in one season, the 3 of those players. Not that these are aimed at being the final destination for any of those players, but they're all young players that have perhaps fast-tracked their career by thinking outside the box and going elsewhere and moved up the leagues quicker. It's a career, of course, and sometimes strategic planning and long ball moves are made with the end goal in the long run being the ultimate target. A route I feel as well is not taken too often by Irish players, in my opinion, where the language wouldn't be really a problem as there is a very high level of English spoken, is Holland, especially for the forward, and perhaps exploring that with a team in the lower tiers initially, somewhere like Holland or Belgium, where it's not too far away. And if you're getting week in, week out 90-minute game time, that's really key for the forward, perhaps, as opportunities to score statistically are more favourable, and as a result the stats get beefed up and you get noticed domestically in those countries' leagues. And again, as a striker, you do need full 90-minute game time to utilise your skills and get those vital goals. If you're only getting on 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, it's hard to get those stats up. And again, it skewers your stats. People see, yeah, he's played whatever. I'm not talking about Kallan here, but let's say whoever has played 15 times and he's only scored 2 goals. Yeah, but like, how many of those 15 games was he playing the entire game? That's key. So that's got to be in your thinking when you move. You gotta, as a striker I'm talking about, you gotta get full 90-minute game time. So you're giving yourself and your future potential suitors see, you know, the realistic return on your game time and on your match time. Again, if you went to somewhere like Holland or Belgium in the lower tiers, a lot of their feeder teams, reserve teams, play down the tiers, and as a result you're going to almost be scouted by default, really, as you're mixing in those circles and they're seeing you on a week in, week out basis, because not only at their games but they'll be scouting their opponents. So you're going to be in the scouting system and opening up your visibility to not just Holland or Belgium, of course, but other leagues, continental sides. So you're giving yourself a wider net, perhaps. Whatever he decides, he's got a great family support group, which is always great to see and have, as you know, you can trust them entirely and they will always do whatever it takes to see you succeed, as opposed to someone just doing a job on your behalf, which is great if you have someone that's great. But if you have someone that you're just a number to, or you're just a pound note to, perhaps they're not doing as much as they could be because they got bigger fish to fry higher up. So your family's always there for you. So if you have got a good family, which in Kallan's case it seems like he does, and they're all backing you and looking out for your best interests, they've only one motive, and that's they love you and they want the best for you. So you can't really fault that. The key factors for now, as said, wherever he goes, is week in, week out 90-minute football, which is essential for the forward and will be the foremost in his planning wherever he decides his next step in his career is going to be. Again, whether that's with Marine FC or elsewhere. An interesting time ahead. I'm sure he will, of course, feel a bit of uncertainty if he doesn't already have his next step sorted, but that's part of the game, and that's the case at all levels and stages in a career. When the dust settles and he chooses what's best for him and his career, he will be able to bed down and continue to focus on his football career path, getting the essential week in, week out 90-minute game time, and in the long term plot and move closer to the end goal of rising up the levels in league, and also financially, of course, that's a factor. But as said, with the current focus on now and continuing the hard work and dedication to his craft he has already put in, important and interesting times ahead for Kallan. If you liked the video, send us a like, subscribe, or leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Or buy us a coffee at the link in the description. And as always, we'll be watching.